Salam everybody, this is Lecture 4 of your game programming class. Last time I left you with a homework assignment. I wanted you to display to the user that they won the game whenever they reached the last level in the area. To do that, we'll add a couple more features in the event sheet. First thing I want to do is add a global variable. So right click, add global variable. We'll call this max level. And the initial value will be the number of levels you've created. I've only created 3, so my value will be 3. So the next thing, basically, what we want to happen is whenever the player collides with the end area, we want to compare two cases. One case, whether he's at the last level, and if he is, to display to the users that he's won, and ignore all following inputs. Or, the secondary case is that he hasn't reached the last level, and then we will proceed with adding one to the current level and going to the next level. So these two actions. So I want to create a blank sub-event. Now double click, select system, and then compare two variables. Current level is equal to max levels. And then select, right click, add, else. So what's going to happen here is whenever the player collides with the end area, these two sub-events are going to be called. The system will first check if the current level is equal to the max levels. If it is, then we'll add an action to display a label that says you won and no longer take inputs. Or we'll proceed with our current increment system, which is system add 1 to current level and system go to layout level. So we'll select these two and then drag them to the else. The add action for when he's at the last level will update level display, set text, you win. Done. However, level text is set to invisible, so I need to make that visible. So select it, hold down Control, drag a copy of it up here, double click, set to visible. So now we have our display whenever we end the game. Following thing I want to add is add another action, player, start, set ignoring input, and we'll set it to start. So now when the player collides with the end area, if it's the last level, then U1 will become visible and the player can no longer move, or we will add 1 to current level global variable and then move on to the next layout, which will be our level. In order to check this out, we need to start from level 1 because our initial value is current level 1, and each time we increment. So I'm going to go ahead and move our player closer to the end area so we don't have to waste any more time. Move this here, move this here. I have noticed a couple of things. My configuration might be different from you guys, you probably have it right, but for my system on start layout is empty. So I have a function over here on start layout that initializes everything. It sets the gold value label, it sets the level display. So what I want to do now is add an action function, call function, on start to call this function. Whenever the start of a layout, call the on start function. Now let's test it. Actually, I want to test it on level 1. So select level 1 first and then run. So level 1. I don't see level 2, so we'll come back to that. Level 3. And you win, and I can no longer move. So that was your homework assignment. However, I did notice a couple of things. Let me check. Yes, so this layer is the main. So we need to rename it. I'm missing a couple of things here. So I'll add another layer. Name this HUD. set the parallax to 0, 0 so it follows you. And I want to check on level 2 if that's the same case. Yeah, so I'm missing layers on my 2 layouts. So I'm going to edit that real quickly. Maybe you have the same problem or you've run into that problem before. And this is how you can fix it. 0. And I'll place this over here so we can run a check. Level 1 should go away in 2 seconds. It goes away. I don't see level 2. That's probably because I started at the very far end. Does my level move with me? No, it does not. That leaves me to believe I did not set the correct layer. Yes. So I need to set this layer to HUD. And that is to HUD. Hit play. Yes, the level moves with me now. Alright, so that's might be a common mistake you run across, and it's based on the fact that your level is not on the correct layer that has a parallax of 0, 0. So that was your homework assignment. Let's move forward. Next we'll create an enemy to make our game a little more interesting. Let me zoom in a bit. So our enemy will be a new object. So double click, select sprite, anywhere. We will give it a color of blue. Yeah, that'll work. Resize it. And this object will be our enemy. We're not focusing on graphics now, but we'll get to it soon. Okay, so right here, let's rename it. And then let's assign it a behavior. We'll select sign behavior, add, and I believe it'll automatically configure with these parameters, 4 and 50, where period is the speed and magnitude is the distance that it will go, and the wave is sine wave. So I can just change a triangle and we'll see what happens. So it does move. So we have a moving enemy that's pacing and guarding or whatever. Let's increase the distance a bit, maybe 100. Set it in the middle, run it again. Yeah, so as you can tell, it's a little weird, and I believe I placed it on the wrong layer. Indeed, it is. It's on the HUD display, the HUD layer. It needs to be on main. Yeah, so that's much better, I think. Yeah, if I don't die. Okay, so that looks okay. Next, we will add some interaction between our enemy and our player. So whenever our enemy collides with a player, he'll receive damage, and whenever the player jumps on top of the enemy, he'll destroy it. To define the player and enemy interaction, we need to update the event sheet. So we'll go in here and create a new group. We'll call it enemy and damage. We'll add an event. And what we want to happen is we need to check, first thing we need to check for is that the player has collided with the enemy. So select player, collision with another object, and choose the enemy. So that is the first condition. Within that, we need to have sub-conditions. So create blank sub-event. The first thing we'll check for is if the player is falling. Is falling. If the player is falling, then we want to verify that he has collided, that he when the player is falling, we want to check that his y coordinates has overlapped and is less than the y coordinates of the enemy. So at this point, the y coordinates down here, the player falls and he is lower than the y coordinates of the enemy. At that point, we will destroy our enemy. So we'll create an action. Actually, we need to create the condition of checking. So create blank sub-event, player, compare y is less than enemy dot y. Also, if you ever have any troubles figuring out what kind of functions to call, you can always click on this section and it defines, actually not in this case, but usually you can click here and it'll define functions that are available. So the player's y coordinates is less than the enemy's coordinates, then we want the enemy to become destroyed. So that is our case. Let's check it. There we go. So I can destroy the enemy. However, if the player is not jumping and he collides with the enemy, then we want the enemy to push the player back. So if the player is not falling, we'll create an else statement. Either way, it's collided with the enemy. First thing we check for is if it's falling. If it's not falling, we go directly to the else statement. In the else statement, we'll create two sub-events. Add blank sub-event. Add blank sub-event. Okay. Now we're going to check for the player's x-coordinates in relation to the enemy's x-coordinate. Compare x less than enemy dot now add in the second sub-event. Here is greater than or equal to enemy dot x. Now we want to add the actions. We will set the platform vector of the player, set vector x to, let's say, -1000 for now. Here, player, set vector x, and I'll explain shortly what this does. So now, if the player has collided with the enemy, first the system will check if it's falling, if the player is falling. If it's not falling, then it'll go to the else statement. Then it'll check if the x coordinate is less than the enemy, in which case it will be on the left hand side, or check if the x is greater than the enemy's x position, where it would be on the right hand side. Depending on which one it is, it will set the player's vector coordinates to -100. So -1000 of its current position. So basically push it backwards or push it forwards, depending on what side the enemy is on. So let's test it out. See, I'm on the right hand side and I get pushed back. Let me check the other side. Oops, I killed it. There's a little mistake. Let me check that. Now that we have our enemy and player interaction defined, let's create a health bar to track it. Zoom out. Double click. Tile background. And we'll import an image. You should have received this image in the email. We'll select HP bar. Resize to 4 by 4. Maybe too small. 16 by 16. Okay. And you have this entire grid of HP bars. I will just use 5 for now. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this will represent our health bar. Except I think I selected the wrong image. HP bar. There we go. That's better. Out. Okay, so now we have our health bar with 5 increments. Next we'll update the event sheet to utilize this health bar. But first I need to change the name. Let's call it HP bar. And let's add an instance variable. Call it max size. Initial value is set to 0. That's good. Event sheet. Here I'll create a global variable, max health, and the maximum number of health bars that we have are 5, corresponding to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there. I'll also create another global variable, call it just HP for health point, set it equal to 0. Below here, at the start of the layout, we have our initiation when we call on start. I also want to initialize our HP. So let me add a blank sub-event. Actually, I don't want it to make it a sub-event. I'll just have a regular event. So just in case if you missed it, let's just add an event here. System, compare variables, HP equal to 0. Then I want to set the HP value to max health. And let's move that up just so we can make sense of things. First we'll have the layout call its onStart function, which has our initialization. And then if the HP is 0, we'll set it to max health. We also need to add an action on the onStart function. You might not have onStart function, but you certainly should have onStart of layout in a list of actions. You can also add an action there. I'll select the HP bar and set size, I believe. Where's size? Set size. Actually, go back. I want to set the value. And I want to set it to self.width. Next, I want to tie in the health bar with our damage from an enemy. So let me create another function. Okay, the on function. And we'll call this take damage. Within that function, we'll have an action which will subtract 1 from our HP. Subtract from HP. And we will adjust the H bar to the correct size. Basically, if I subtract 1 from HP, I should only see 4 HP bars, HP icons. So add an action, HP bar, set width. Here, we'll set it to self.max times HP divided by HP max. Max size. Here we go. So self.max size times HP divided by HP max. Except it doesn't see HP max. Let's try this. Max health. Done. Now we'll add this function call whenever the enemy is pushed back. So add action, function, call function, take damage. Let's test it out and then I'll fully explain it. Oops. So now we have 5 health bars. I hit the enemy. I lose 1. It's a little bit odd. Hold on. So I see one problem already. If I hit the enemy target, I should at least see 4. I shouldn't have all my HP bars missing. So let's go back to the event sheet and see what's going on. On the start of layout, we call this function onStart. onStart sets up our labels, and then the system waits. And then HP bar is set, the max size is set. So if we take damage before HP bar is set, then we reduce it to 0, starting off at 0. So that's where our issue occurs. A quick fix is just to select system HP set to max health, place it here, and we want both of these to be initialized before, before the system waits. So usually the level is displayed for 2 seconds, the system waits for 2 seconds, and then it sets to the invisible. We don't want to have to wait because we could hit the enemy before that. And we want our variables to be initialized. So that should solve the problem. Let's try it out. Okay, yep. So we kept losing and the level is gone, so we no longer wait 2 seconds. As you can tell, every time I hit the enemy, I lose 1 health bar. So let me explain exactly what's going on. This is how the HP bar works. We have a maximum health of 5, which is our 5 individual icons, and we set our current HP to 0. On the start of layout, we set that HP to max health, which is here. On the start of layout, we set the HP to max health, and we also set the max size of the HP bar. The max size is the instance variable we created, and set that to the width of the object. So it says self.width. That corresponds to the width of this entire object, and we set that to the maximum size. And whenever we take damage, when the enemy is on the left or on the right, we call function take damage. Take damage subtracts 1 from HP. So HP right now is 5 since we're at max health, and we resize the width. The width is now the max size times 4 over 5. So that percentage, 4 over 5, will display 4 icons out of the 5. And as we continue to take damage, the HP value will decrease by 1 until we have 3, 2, 1, and then we'll see 3, 2, 1. So that is how the HP bar works. You have your original size, and then you take a percentage of it, where HP over the max health. Now when we have a HP value of 0, we don't want the HP bar to go back to max. We want the game to end or the game to start back at level 1. So as you can tell here, we just get our health back. So let's change the event sheet. Here, when HP equal to 0, we want the system to go to level or layout. Go to layout. Level 1. Okay, that's nice. We'll go to level 1. And then we'll reset that. Go to level 1 and let's see if we should call onStart. I think so. Let's call onStart function and see how that works. Oh, now we're at level 1, so it worked out pretty nicely. So whenever your HP value goes to 0, you're no longer at that current level. You just restart the whole game to level 1. We can change that up later, but that's the general premise. Now that we have the enemy working and the interaction with the player working, and we have a health bar, let's add animation, or at least one animation. So let's double click here, add sprite, and we're going to import our image. And these images I'll have sent to you guys. I have them in the character folder, and I will pick walk. So here's our image. It'll eventually be our animation. First thing we want to do is import all our frames. So animation is just a bunch of frames looping at a certain speed. So to import all our frames, let's right click here, import frames. I'll pick the walking folder, select all of them, and be sure to delete slot 0 and start from there. And I'll rename this to walk. To preview it, let's right click, select preview. And this is our animation walking. Let's set the loop to yes and the speed to 15 and preview it. It's a little better. Maybe we can go faster. Maybe too fast. Alright, we'll just stick to 18 for now. Let's close this out. Rename this to player animation. Let's go to our event sheet. Let's add a group. We'll call it animation. We will add I just want a blank event. Blank sub-event. I'm just going to move it out here. Now I'm going to assign the animation part to our character. So I'm going to assign this guy to here, basically pinning it. So add an action, player animation, set position to another object. That object will be player. And image point will be 0. Okay, so let's test this out. And here's our animation and our red object. As you can tell, it's not exactly perfect or centered, so let's adjust that. Because we already defined it in the event sheet to automatically pin to our player, we can leave it outside of the scope of the level. So double click and let's zoom in. And click on your origin point, and your origin is up here. And we want to move that to the bottom. So go to right click, quick assign, bottom, and we want to apply this to all of our frames. Sorry. Apply to the whole animation, and as you can tell, the origin point is on the bottom for all of these. Just close this out and test it. So now we have our animation moving, and it's not directly centered. So let's check the origin point of our player. And indeed, its origin point is in the middle, and we'll change that to the bottom. Close that, rerun it, and now we have our player exactly on the right spot. Next, we want to make our player invisible, so we just see the animation. So on start of layout, let's add an action. If I can find it, here we go. Let's add it to right here. Player, visible, invisible, and we want that to occur before the wait. The 2-second wait. This 2-second wait is for the level. Whenever the level shows up, it tells you level 1, level 2, and whatnot, waits 2 seconds, and then becomes invisible. Just refresh. Click run, and now we just have our character, which we can move. It's constantly running, walking, or whatever you want to say. So there are a little bit of bugs. I think something is not quite right. So let me check that out. I believe our player is not on the correct layer. It should be on main. Try running it again. Looks better. Yeah, so it's because our layer, the animation was on a different layer. So let's add, as you can tell, it's just constantly running, and we want it to have different states. State where it's just standing there, state when it's running, looking in the right direction, instead of just like this. So we'll add those functionalities to the event sheet. Next, we want to make sure the player is running or facing the correct direction. To do that, we need to add a keyboard object. And then in our event sheet, we'll go here, click keyboard, and I believe it's on key pressed. And we'll choose right arrow, okay. Now create another one. Actually, I want to move it inside here. Hold down Control, select, drag, creates another one. And we will choose one for left arrow. We'll assign an action, player animation, mirrored, set mirrored. I believe this is correct for that one, but we can always check it. And for this, we'll have not mirrored. Let's test it out. Our character return. Yep. If I go, oh, I have to hold it. No, that should be right. Seems something to be a little off. Yeah. So my error is on key released. We don't want released. We want on key is down, on key pressed. We'll choose left. Then change this to on key down, on key pressed I mean. Choose right. I believe that should solve it. Run it. Nope. Let me figure out what's going on. So I have the set mirrored swapped. Change this to not mirrored. Change this to mirrored. Run it. Let's check now. Okay, right key down, looking left key down, looking left, right key down, looking right. Okay, that's much better. Alright. Yeah, so we're good. I'm going to add a behavior to our player animation to make it a little more interesting. I'm going to add flash. And then in the event sheet, whenever the player takes damage, I want him to flash. We'll take the default. That's fine. I don't know. It looks cooler. I like it. He flashes for a second, so you know that you've hit him. It's not really that important, but oh well. Now let's add in all the other animation frames. We'll go in here, add animation. We'll call this idle. Click here, and we will import our frames from the folders that I will send to you guys. Idle. Select all of them. Delete the 0 frame. Change the origin to the bottom. Apply that to all the frames. And now we should adjust our speed and make it looping. I'll go with 12. Preview. So there's a little motion when the player is not moving. And by default we want our player to be in this state, an idle state. And to do that, it needs to be the first animation. Let's test it out. Yeah, so he's in idle state. And then whenever we press a key, we want him to run. So let's add that functionality. Let's swap between idle animation and walking animation. So let's add in a sub-event. Actually, can I do it from here? I'm curious. Can I? Yeah, so I can. We'll do this. We'll select player. When he is on the platform, when he's on the floor, then we want to create a couple more sub-events. Oops, I'll just make it blank. Double click this. The player is not moving. So we only have is moving, so right click and invert means is not moving. Then we want the player animation to be set to idle. Set animation idle from beginning. Yes, from beginning. If he is moving, then we want the player, I'll just copy this, to be in the walking state. And we define that, so both idle and walk were defined over here, just in case in our animation. It's a reference. So let's test it. The logic should be good. Yep, I'm running. Stopped. Yep. Stopped. Running. When he jumps, he's running in the air. So that's not entirely correct. But you guys should now be able to add the following animations. We'll add one for jump. We'll go here and import the frames for jumping. Let me pull up the character. You'll set the origin point. Basically, this is your homework assignment. I want you to program or import the jumping state and then program the event sheet so that when your character is jumping, no longer on the platform and he's jumping, that you have the jumping animation. And then you also have landing animation, and I want you guys to try to implement that. And if you can't do it, that's fine. Try your best, and we will talk about it, and I'll show you how to do it in the next lecture. Also, I want you guys to create health pickups. So, in each level, where is my game? So each level, I want you guys to create one health pickup. Let me kill this guy. And basically, that health pickup, when you pick it up, it should increment your health bar by 1. However, it should not exceed 5. 5 is the max. And you guys have all the tools and knowledge to create that health pickup by using, it's similar to the coin, but you just have to change the logic in the event.